Good afternoon. We are continuing our discussion on violence, the discussion that we started last week. I would like first to acknowledge the presence of Professor Danvatari. Thank you for joining us today. So today we will discuss a little bit the first assignment. So I would like to offer you some advice, last minute advice, since you have to submit your paper in 2 days. And then we will briefly discuss what we said last class. Also, after that, we will discuss on violence, the subjectivity and ethics perspective. And finally, we will conclude our class with the usual discussion. So I would like to provide you an example of a title page. This is one of mine. What is important to do is to remember is that the grading will be anonymized. Therefore, it is crucial that you don't write your name on the document that you submit on the title page. Nothing that can help me identify you. So we are sure that the grading will not be biased. Then, as we discussed last week, I suggest that you divide your introduction in 2 paragraphs. The first paragraph is a way to open the text. You can provide some context justifying the relevance of the question I'm asking, which is a little bit hard. Or you can also provide an anecdote that connects you with the theme of your paper, or you can also talk about a book that you read or movie, TV show that you watched that reminded you of the concept you discussed in the essay. So that's a way to grab the attention of the reader, since there is some emotion connection with what you are discussing. But then it's important to remember that after you discuss your example or your anecdote, you leave it alone. You don't talk about it in your development. You can go back to it only at the conclusion when you open again the text, because the development is really about you and Fanon and nothing else. So the second paragraph of the introduction, this is an example. I just want you to look at the verbs that are used. So this is a professor of philosophy in Newfoundland. She wrote, I will begin with a brief discussion of Fanon. I will then bring this framework into dialogue. I will demonstrate this by. So this is how you explain to the reader how you will proceed in the introduction, how you will proceed in the text. What is your method? And after that, if you want, this is of course optional. In the development, you can insert some titles for which main ideas that you develop. So that makes your text a little bit clearer and a little bit more easy to read. So this is an example from my text, my thesis. So you can do that. So you see that every time I make a claim on Fanon, I back it up with a textual evidence. So I provide the source in footnotes. You can do that in footnotes or you can do that in parentheses. It's up to you as long as it's there. And don't forget to write the page numbers at the top or the bottom of the page. And this is now an example on how to end the conclusion. So again, I just want you to look at the verbs that are used. So I justify that, we have shown that, and in the next two, so that means the end of the conclusion is an opening to the future. So since it was a chapter, so I said what I will write in the future chapters, but you can say further studies should develop this concept to improve our understanding on racial epidermal schema, for example. So it's an opening, so you can also do implications of your conclusion or alternative solutions to the problem. And of course, don't forget to add the bibliography section or the works cited. So this is an example. Now we can go back to on violence. What was important last week is our discussion on Manichaean word or compartmentalized word. So that makes Fanon still compelling, relevant 60 years after the publication of The Wretched of the Earth. This description of colonialism as a Manichaean word, which resonates in many countries in the world, especially South Africa with apartheid and USA with Jim Crow laws. It's really this idea of a dualism, a duality, this opposition between two extremes, the good and the evil. So the colonized sector, as Fanon says, is a sector built to last, all stone and steel. It's a sector of light and paved road where the trash cans constantly overflow with strange and wonderful garbage, undreamed of leftovers. The colonists' feet are protected by solid shoes in a sector where the streets are clean and smooth. The colonist's belly is permanently full of good things. So you see this quotation in page 31 in The Wretched of the Earth. And by opposition, the colonized zone is all the opposite. Colonized sector is a famished sector, hungry for bread, meat, shoes, coal, and light. So you see also this description in page 31. And also what we discussed last week is that what Fanon is accomplishing in the text is a certain deconstruction of certain assumptions regarding colonialism. He questions first, the legitimacy of the power. So if we use a humanist perspective to judge the legitimacy of power, we see that Europe is not legitimate because they assert their power through murder, pillage, the destruction of existing social forms. Secondly, what we discuss is how Fanon questions the invincibility of the imperial military arsenal. When we think, and he used the example of Dien Bien Phu. So it's just saying that the masses, the colonized, should all use transistors. So that means They should all be in tuned, connected to the atmospheric violence in the world. So they know that it's not impossible to defeat empires. You just have to know when to strike. Dien Bien Phu in 54 is a good example, since they won the battle against an empire like France, even though Vietnamese at the time were impoverished and hungry. Finally, what we discussed last week is how Fanon questioned the sincerity of colonized intellectuals who lead nationalist social movements. He says that they use a certain rhetoric to manipulate the masses, and they use the words brother, sister, comrades, and they talk about the past history of slavery, but all these words are empty. It's just a way to manipulate people. They are not connected to the real needs of bread and land. The colonized intellectuals are only interested in their own benefits, their own money. So we have to stay suspicious, according to Fanon. So now we can ask ourselves, how can a person gain the drive to fight to his death for his freedom? So because there are two challenges, the colonized has to overcome the fear of the violence of the power, and he also has to overcome the dominant ideology that says that he's inferior to all these people, and so he almost deserves that pain that he's suffering. So the colonized has to go through some stages before being able to fight. First, Fanon describes the dreams. Oh my God, he says, hence the dream of the colonized subject are muscular dreams, dreams of action, dreams of aggressive vitality. I dream I am jumping, swimming, running, and climbing. I dream I burst out laughing. It says that in page 35. So we notice that for Fanon, psychoanalysis is more compelling than psychology. Therefore, dreams for him are meaningful. Dreams for him indicate what has been deferred. And in this case, what is deferred is the anger. So the colonized is not able to fight yet, but you see that the desire to fight is there in his dreams. He has this latent anger in him. And then there is this description of fratricidal bloodbath. Fanon says, by throwing himself, muscle and soul into his blood feuds, the colonized subject endeavors to convince himself that colonialism has never existed, that everything is as it used to be, and history marches on. He says that in page 35 in The Wretched of the Earth. And so what that means is that police harass, humiliate the colonized on the daily basis. And also the education system helps to maintain an inferiority complex among colonized. And the consequence is that anger, aggressiveness sedimented in the muscles. And this is, so there is some anger and aggressiveness in the muscle, but it is deferred and moved towards other colonized people. So that's how Fanon explains internal violence among the colonized. Because at this point, fighting the colonist is an option he does not want to see yet. Of course, there are other descriptions in the chapter on how the aggressiveness is expressed. There is also religion, dances, rituals. All of them are other ways to defer the aggressiveness. But I think at this point you see what Fanon is trying to show. So the final stage of this conversion of the colonized subject is the rebellion. And he says, with his back to the wall, the knife at his throat, or to be more exact, the electrode on his genitals, the colonized subject is bound to stop telling stories. So that means that an event upsets the colonized so much that he is willing to risk his well-being to meet the demands of his new ethics. And to understand that this idea, Fanon quote Les Armes Miraculeuses, which is a poem written by Aimé Césaire, the founder of the Negritude movement. So you have an enslaved person who is talking. He says, I killed him with my own hands. Him is his former master. Yes, a vacant and copious death. I chose to open my child's eyes to another sun. It was me. It was indeed me. I told him, the good slave, the faithful slave, the slave, and I struck. The blood spurted. It is the only baptism that today I remember. So the faithful slave who killed his master, in order to do that, he sacrificed his value, his own moral prohibition, because he obeyed a morality that he now considers higher. As if the baby that he's talking about is calling his father, and the father was confused for a moment, just like when Paul converted to Christianism. So when just like when Paul fell from his horse and became blind, this is the same thing that happened to the enslaved person. He saw his baby, and this was his new son, new God, new ethics. It the new the ethic is no longer what the master prescribed, it's what fatherhood prescribes. And so in order to obey this new ethics, he must kill the former master. So this is how the colonized convert to this subjectivity. So to summarize what we said today and what we discussed also last week, um, so you can see that there are three stages in the conversion of the colonized: assimilation, return to the past, revolution. And there are three perspectives that you can see: ethics, epistemology, psychoanalysis. So when the colonized was in the assimilation phase, so the ideal of the self is the colonizer, but then when he is in the revolution phase, the ideal of the self is the warrior, the one who commits suicide rather than give up his accomplices, as Fanon says in page 30. When the colonized was in this assimilation phase, the truth is whatever the colonizer says true. But when he is in the revolution phase, the truth is the land and the bread. So Fanon says, for the colonized, the most essential value is the land. He said that in page 32. And when the colonized was in the assimilation phase, the good was whatever the colonizer said is good. But when he is in the revolution phase, the good is whatever kills the colonizer. So Fanon says, to work means to work towards the death of the colonist. He says that in page 45. So warriors give the colonized new schemes of action or new body schema. And so through violent struggle, the colonized finds himself equal to his opponents, the whites, who are forced to recognize him as an enemy subjectivity. So the struggle is a praxis that allows consciousness to free from the subjugation, free from the alienation. So the praxis of violence, up until now, all I said was my interpretation or my reading of Fanon, but this is from Mathieu Renaud. So he says that the praxis of violence has two goals. There is the struggle for survival, like an animal-like resistance to his death, as we described. The colonized had nothing to eat. It was so just like an animal, it's just fighting to survive. But there is also this idea of struggle for the recognition of humanity in a hostile, unlivable world. Because as we said, when we discuss the North African syndrome, the doctor refused to treat the patient because the pain is unintelligible. And so So getting the pain, according to Renaud, is the same as negating the humanity of these people. So this struggle involved killing, and so this violence for Fanon is detoxifying, purifying, and creator of humanity. It is necessary to kill the colonizer in order for the new humanity to live. Because the colonialism is not there to kill the colonized, but to make them agonize. Hunger, illness, constant violence. So next week, next Thursday, we will finish our discussion on violence. Now we will focus on the international context, and we will see how Fanon see the needs for Europe to pay for the reparations in Algeria. And now we can move on to the discussion. Thank you.